Welcome to La Taverna Friuli podcast, the definitive podcast on the wines of Friuli, Venezia Giulia. I'm your host, Wayne Young. Join me here each week for casual conversations with wine people and other characters from this undiscovered region of Friuli, Venezia Giulia in northeast Italy. Hey, Friuli wine fans, welcome to La Taverna Friuli Wine. Wayne Young, your friend here. Going back to October 2023 for a best of episode this week. I haven't done an English episode in a while, so wanted to come at you with an older episode. Definitely some stuff here that bears repeating. This conversation with restaurant owner, master sommelier Bobby Stuckey. Bobby is a producer of Friuli and wine as well. A good friend. I met him 25 years ago or 26 years ago here in Friuli. We talk a little bit about that at the beginning. But I really love Bobby's takes on the ways we need to teach Friuli and wine, the benefits of having so many different styles and so many different grape varieties that all work well together here. Such a great conversation. It's such an easy guy to talk to. And I thank Bobby, as usual, for taking the time out of his busy day to have this conversation with me 2.5 years ago. Time flies when you're having fun. We will be back with a new episode of La Taverna next week. But for now, I'm going to leave you with this best of episode with Master Sommelier Bobby Stuckey.
Good. Danette says hi. We've lived in the same house for 20 years and we're packing it up for a remodel.
Oh.
And your Udine plate has been on our fireplace counter.
Don't break it.
Since you gave it to us 20 years ago.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you've kept that because, that's your involvement in Friuli and stuff is important to me. So knowing that you've held on to that means a lot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it'll go back in the house after the remodel.
Sounds good. It's a big deal. You're going to be out of the house for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. And the project got bigger than it was supposed to. I think we'll be out at least 6 months, maybe a year.
Whoa. That is a big deal. So are you enlarging or just remodeling?
Kind of both.
Okay.
We're creating a new master bedroom and giving Danette kind of an art studio.
Nice.
Yeah, it'll be cool.
What about you? Are you going to get like a man cave or whatever? Are you going to have like a little...
Nah. I'll get one of the older bedrooms will be an office. I'll finally have an office. But yeah, no man cave for Bobby. I'm fine.
Or like a workout area, like a big gym or something?
No, not really.
You're always out anyway.
Yeah, and Danette lets me listen to any music I want, so I don't need a man cave.
Ah, that's good.
Yeah.
How long have you guys been married?
24 years.
Fantastic.
Coming up on 24 years. Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Congratulations. It's a big
deal. You got to be about there with your partner.
Yeah, we've been together we got married in 2002. So yeah, we just did 21 years. We'll be 22 in January.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Congratulations on your star.
Oh, wow.
That's a big
Crazy
deal.
Stuff. Yeah, it's big for Colorado. Not our star, but the fact that Michelin is in Colorado is a big positive for Colorado.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So I wanted to talk to you tonight because you come from sort of a unique place because you're sort of an ambassador for wine and for the restaurant world in general, but you do have a particular love for all things Friulano, and the podcast is sort of geared towards Friuli and wine. And one of the things that I've been speaking to some friends about, and what I've been talking to some friends and stuff, and I've been doing this podcast now for over 2 years. This is going to be the beginning of season 5. What I thought I really wanted to talk to somebody about, what this situation is in the world for Friuli and wine. And not only are you someone who loves Friulian wine, has a deep connection to this place, and you're an American, and you have your own restaurant, and you're a master sommelier, and you know about these wines in a very deep and intimate way, but you also sell these wines as well. You're also commercially involved with Friulian wine, right? Is that still a project?
100%.
Yeah, cool.
Bigger than ever.
Bigger than ever.
Yeah, and quite frankly, we've probably turned on, I don't know how many producers to importers in the United States.
You did one of them for me.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that happens probably at least quarterly. So if you do 4 producers a year for 20 years, there's a lot of producers that are in parts of America with the help of the Frasca umbrella.
Right.
And then we also have the Scarpetta winery that we have. And so we're in all 50 states with that. So we really track Friulano wine to the maximus.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why I really wanted to speak to you, because I'm really interested to understand like what the status of Friulian wine in the American market is. I was happy to talk to you just about the status of Friulian wine in your own market, in your own restaurants, and basically what I wanted to do was sort of, and I want to do this with a guy who I met who also works in London, and I also have Brian Larkey lined up to talk to about this, but I wanted to do sort of like a SWOT analysis, like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of Friulian wine out there in the world, because there's a lot of kind of, I don't know what you could call it, maybe negative energy, a lot of fear, a lot of sort of insecurity, I guess would be the right word for it, about, the future of Friulian wine in the world and its place amongst the great wines in the world. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. But maybe before we get into that, can you tell me a little bit more about like sort of Scarpetta and how that started? And
yeah, I mean, it started and this goes to the thesis of how much Friulano wine has expanded. When we opened Frasca 20 years ago, we couldn't get a reasonable by the glass Friulano.
Right.
There wasn't much in the state. And so we went to Christian Patat at Ronco de Nemetz, and I said, hey, man, can you help us make 100 cases of by the glass Friulano that we could pour by the glass as a Tayut at Frasca?
Okay.
That's how it started.
All right.
That's how Scarpetta started. We did not ever expect that we would become the kind of this by the glass brand that Lachlan really has shepherded more than anybody.
Okay.
And it's really, really grown. And there's a many reasons for why we were able to do that. But that's how it started. It's been really great for all of us. It's been great for the restaurant. It's been great for the farmers we work with, all sorts of stuff.
And you don't do just Friulian wine. You also do some wines from outside of Friuli as well. I mean, I think you do a Friulano and a Pinot Grigio from here. Do you also do like a Ribolla Gialla or anything like that?
No, we do a Friulano Chard blend.
Okay.
We do a little Chardonnay. We do a little Cabernet Franc. We do some Prosecco, but from the Grave, not from Valdobbiadene.
Okay.
And yeah. And then we do a little Sangiovese down in Tuscany and a little Barbera in Piemonte. But really the core driver is Friuli as the spiritual homeland of the winery, kind of like how Frasca's spiritual homeland is.
Gotcha. And so what, as a master somm, right, what was it that sort of drew you to Friuli in general? What was it? Was there did you have like an aha wine, or did you have like a moment when you were like, this could be like a really cool place? Or, what was the sort of the impetus for you to have such a deep interest in Friuli?
Well, it's funny. The same thing that fascinated me 25 years ago about Friuli is just magnified now. But for some people, it's really exciting. For some people, it's really scary. Friuli is the most diverse region, even before Vini Macerati. If you think about in Friuli, 25 years ago, you could drink back then. That was right before Gravner started doing, I think, 94. So 30 years ago now. 30 years ago, he started in 94 or 95. He and Radikon started making macerated wine. But if you think of
Right.
just a little bit before that, he was making very, very powerful, textural, rich whites. But
Right.
then you could also have in like Schiappetto or Faluga or any other number of producers. And what I was always intrigued of with Friuli is that they're all correct. They're just different.
Okay.
Versus used to live in Napa, and if you took a sommelier that was visiting you from Paris and go to see three Napa producers, if you didn't choose wisely, they could all have the exact same barrel, picking at the exact same bricks level, might even have the same consultant winemaker,
Okay.
25 years ago in Napa. And Friuli was so interesting to me is there was so much diversity in style, but what seemed like everyone had their own point of view, but they were all okay with it.
Okay.
I remember eating this is early on, eating at Devitech up in the Carso.
Sure.
I think it was like, I might be wrong here, but I think I was with like Andrea Faluga and Stanko Radikon at the same table.
Wow.
And they were like buddies, and they were totally respectful of each other. They could not be more polar opposites in winemaking style.
Exactly. Oh yeah. Galaxies of difference there.
And that's something that you can see all over the place.
Yeah. I think that's sometimes people look at that as a handicap rather than looking at that as an advantage. Too much variety, too many different grape varieties, too much difference in style. There's no coherence for Friuli as a region. What do you think about somebody who says something like that?
I don't think they really. I don't want to be rude, but they don't get it.
Okay.
They got to slow down and look at the history. They've got to learn how to taste. The great thing about Friuli is it doesn't matter, even if it's a light Grave style producer, it has more extract than things in the Veneto or Alto Adige.
Right.
Friuli has a weight to it that transcends pretty much almost all regions. Now, there's different degrees of it. Obviously, if we're drinking something from the Collio, it's much more powerful than something in the Grave. But still, like I always think Friuli reminds me way more of Austria than it does the Veneto
Okay.
in kind of the weight and power. And I think as a professional wine taster, I think we learn about wine in Friuli wrong. So part of the problem is if you read a book, a French wine book, or any great wine book or website, you have the Loire River Valley is one region. You have
Mm-hmm.
Burgundy is one region. You have Beaujolais has a little subsection in Burgundy, and then you have the Rhone, but they're all separate. But in if you're an Anglophone studying Italy, or if you're a wine writer writing about Italy in the Western world, you put Alto Adige, Trentino, Veneto, Friuli together as Northeastern Italy. And that's a mess.
Absolutely.
Because it's wrong. It's not how we should learn. That's the wines of Friuli have their own weight and style and extract. And if you think about the diversity, you have to look at the history in the sense, I don't like the word indigenous versus international with Friuli.
Right.
I think it should really be indigenous or historical.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So Chardonnay, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Sauvignon Blanc for sure. They're historical. They've been there quite some time, over 250 years.
Exactly.
In many spots. So that's not indigenous. But for God's sake, we throw Friulano in as indigenous, and quite arguably, it could have gotten there about the same time
if
as
not later.
Sauvignon.
Yeah.
If not, I don't like to say that because then that really confuses people. But you're right. So we think we give Friulano a hall pass, but then some sommeliers or wine writers are against Chardonnay. There are 100-year-old Chardonnay vines in Friuli that are so special.
Yeah.
Now, why would we rip that up to plant Ribolla there? That doesn't make sense. That's too trendy at the moment. Like, there's these historical vineyards that have been just making incredible wine, and we should really embrace that and understand that. And I think that's where we miss out, and it gets everyone all confused.
So do you think sort
Go
of
ahead.
the limit of maybe growth, because, Friuli kind of had its peak a couple of decades ago, maybe a decade ago, when people were talking about vintage Tunina and Terre Alte, and there was this sort of super whites movement. And, everybody talks about the Anni d'Oro here in Friuli, where, everybody was bottling their wine. Everybody was making lots of money bottling wine. And now there seems to be a little bit more of a struggle. I mean, a lot of people who are producing wine in the part of the Grave are making more money, and a hectare of vineyards in an area like, I don't know, Aquileia is actually more valuable than a hectare of land up in Collio, simply because you can make more money down in the flat than you can up there. So, I mean, I think the kind of thing that I'm trying to get at was the mistake that we've made all along, sort of just teaching people incorrectly about what Friuli's all about?
I think so.
You think so?
I think we should be very understanding of, and I say this as we, like, I'm a Friulano person, but I really spiritually feel that way. I really think we teach the world the wrong way. Everyone's got to look at a wine book and say, that's not how you should learn. This is why Friuli is this way. We can equally have super exhilarating indigenous varietals, and we can have great historical varietals. What made the golden years, as you called it, back with those super whites, is because we naturally can make powerful white wine.
Okay.
We just naturally did. We naturally can make, and I think there could be another renaissance with Pinot Bianco. I think the representations of the Collio Pinot Bianco could really tell a story in itself, but we need to get aligned in our storytelling and understand it's okay and really embrace the diversity. Versus when a wine writer, and I read it, all of the articles, when they lean into something and are confused or scared of the diversity, we have to say, hold on, we need to embrace, and we're going to show you how to embrace the diversity.
Okay.
And this diversity is not new.
Right. Well, yeah. If you know anything about Friuli, you know that this has been going on for a long time.
Yeah, and I think it's really safe to say we don't message properly that Vini Macerati was rebirthed in Friuli 100% in that little town of Islavia, but it's kind of like gluten-free.
Okay, this I like. Keep going.
I'm like, look, I'm going to work at Pizzeria Alberico tonight. Yeah, we have a lot of gluten-free people in Boulder, but it's really a small megaphone. We're going to sell less than 10% of our pizzas will be gluten-free. Great. We're there to give you great product. But Vini Macerati is a very small but large megaphone.
Yeah.
If you really look at the production, but the misnomer is every time I have a wine professional at Frasca or I meet them out on the road, they go, we looked at your wine list. Why don't you have more orange wine? Well, I go, well, we have the right amount of orange wine. It's like people in the United States think the whole region is
all about
macerated
wine. Yeah, exactly.
So there's that messaging. I think we really need to codify the diversity and codify. I just think of that dinner table with Andrea Faluga and Stanka. To me, that is the epitome of what Friuli should be messaging.
Okay. That everything is good. Yeah, I'm one of the guys. I mean, I'm here at the Tasting Academy at Villanachini for the Consorzio for Colli Orientali. And one of the things that a guy like Matteo Bellotto says very often is that we have to look at all of the different wines and different grape varieties and areas that we make in Friuli as sort of a big orchestra. And you're going to need your triangles and you're going to need your timpanis as well. You need all of these different instruments to sort of create a full sound.
100%. I mean, look, people don't know in the United States, like you look at the varietal you work with, Schiapettino, it's a very small area in the Colli Orientali that it really becomes magical.
Right. It's just really Propoto and Chala, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. And like, no one over here in the United States knows that. So they're like, oh, all we want is Schiapettino. Well, go get that. And like, whoa. You have to understand that varietal. And you have to understand how great it is in Propoto and Chala. But that's where it's great.
Is that an added level of complexity that you think makes Friuli maybe a little bit more difficult?
No.
I
think we understand Nebbiolo and Piedmont. They just know how to message it.
Okay.
I think what we need to do is we have to get back down to basics of our diversity and our terroirs. I love that. I'm going to totally rip that off, that idea of the symphony, because that's what makes Friuli so perfect. Is whatever you want, there's the right instrument at the right tone somewhere.
Right. Yeah,
and that's not a negative.
Yeah, well, but I hear so often, and I hear this from producers, I hear this from winemakers, that if only Friuli had the type of concentrated messaging that a place like Burgundy has. Burgundy has Chardonnay, Pinot Noir. That's it. There's no confusion there. Or the messaging of a place like Châteauneuf-du-Pape or Chianti, where the name of the place is the thing and the grapes are completely secondary and it's all about the blend and it's all about the vineyard. Here, there's a little bit of a mix and match of all of that stuff. So, Friulians like to complain. That's the invasion personality. These guys have been overrun for centuries, so they're always looking out for the next big threat. So, how's the opportunity to turn that around for a producer to make them realize that that's not necessarily the solution to growth as far as sales are concerned?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it's possible. I think look how well 30 years ago, 25 years ago, Austria really messaged to the United States about Austria, and now they're
always bring up that example.
They did a great job, and they continue to do a great job. We and I'm using inclusive here because I care about Friuli so much, and until I'm not on this planet anymore, I will be pounding this gong. We really need to get good at educating in a snippet that people understand diversity is key. That's the strength. That's the power play. It's indigenous and historical, not indigenous versus international. Why? So people understand how long it's been there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just read someone's book. I don't want to say who, but they were like, really kind of bashing on what I call historical, they call international varietals, but then they give a hall pass to Friulano. That's just how misunderstood we know about these varietals and how long they've been here. And we should really champion that and champion that. What is so cool? I mean, one of the biggest complaints people complain now about Napa is that everything's been uprooted and it's all Cabernet in one note.
Okay.
We don't.
So that's the sort of the other side of the same coin, right?
100%. Remember, I mean, it's not that long ago that when Napa, you could have crazy funky Petit Syrah vineyards. You could drink Sauvignon Blanc from Tocolon, shit, like crazy Chenin, all these things.
Right.
Now, pretty limited what's planted there.
So narrowing your focus necessarily isn't the best strategy.
No, unless you've got a couple monasteries in 1,000 years.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And we got that over here. We got some time. We got some monasteries. That's happening.
Yeah. I always say, as the kid who got kicked out of Jesuit school, I am very attuned to see the pros and cons of Catholicism. And one of the biggest pros is that the monasteries in Burgundy did a great job of telling the Vatican that they were working on scripture, but they were really taking two very mutatable varietals, Pinot Noir specifically and Chardonnay, and kept replanting the clones that were Pinot Fin, that were finer.
Okay.
So it wasn't not only that they had Pinot Noir and Chardonnay as their two notes, they made those power chords by thousands of years of, they did the exact opposite of what Tuscany did.
Mm-hmm.
Tuscany had, they say, but because of sharecropping, they kept planting the wrong clone.
Okay.
And so that's where Burgundy, yeah, we're not going to duplicate Burgundy. No one should try to.
No.
We should put strengths.
So for the wines that you sell, have you been seeing those, especially, I mean, I would really like to sort of concentrate on something like Friulano, because that being sort of the most Friulian of the wines that you work with Scarpetta. Is that something that you see, constant sort of good growth coming out of those sales? Have they been sort of up and down? Obviously, pandemic notwithstanding, but how is that doing in the market in the States?
Funny who you're in front of. If you're in front of like a sommelier that's just really geeking out, he only wants to taste Friulano.
Gotcha.
But if you're with a wine buyer, like a retail or whatever, they're really willing to try all the stuff, because they're like, oh yeah, I have guests that love Pinot Grigio. I have guests that love Chardonnay. So it's kind of, we get growth because there's two avenues. There's the more, hey, I'll try it all avenue, or there's the avenue of, we only want what they think of as indigenous.
Okay.
So you add sales there, where you might be not able to sell someone like that Pinot Grigio or Chardonnay or Cabernet Franc.
So if you were a producer of, like, say, Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay, let's take either one of those as an example, in a market that has so much Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc, how do you differentiate yourself? How do you get your product into the hands of someone who, would probably just be happy with any Chardonnay or Sauvignon Blanc? How do you differentiate yourself? I think that happened to Pinot Grigio with the Ramato thing. We need to have a new angle on Pinot Grigio. Let's go back to that sort of ancestral style of, a little bit of maceration, a little bit of that onion skin Ramato color, and then people be like, wow, that's a really cool Pinot Grigio. So how do you stand out as a small place like Friuli in a world full of Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc?
You have to pull corks. You've got to really show people what's in the glass. Because I think, as someone who I have down in Denver, I have Tavernetta on one side of the alley. The other side, Sunday Vinyl. Sunday Vinyl is an all-world wine list. Tavernetta is an all-Italian list. So in any shift, I could taste Sancerre, or I could taste Friulano Sauvignon Blanc. I think it's just, you need to have the seminars, pull the cork, and show people what's going on. I always think of Sauvignon Blanc and Friuli as like the secret weapon.
Uh-huh. I've heard you say that before. Yes.
Check it out. And look, things have caught up a little bit in the Loire because of some good farming there, and some climate change is maybe helping them a little bit. But still, Friuli Sauvignon Blanc, there's a lot of producers there with much lower yields than in the Loire. And the Sauvignon Blanc can have, Friuli is one of those spots when they ace it where you can have extract and power, but still with great Sauvignon Blanc vertical acidity. When you try to do that in Napa Valley, many producers have to pick so underripe to keep the acidity.
Right.
It's not as fun.
Gotcha. So you're just like, you got to get it in front of people. You got to get it in front of.
You got it.
Yeah. And you're going to make believers out of them.
Yeah, I'll work at Frasca tomorrow night. I bet you I could go the whole year and I never turn someone on to a Friulano Sauvignon Blanc where they're like, oh, as long as I listen to them. Oh, no. That's great. I've never had someone say, no, that's not my style of Sauvignon Blanc. It's really, they just got to try it.
Yeah, I used to do that when I worked at Becco all the time. People would ask for Pinot Grigio by the glass, and I would bring them Friulano. Tokai at that time was still called Tokai Friulano. And I would pour them a taste. I was like, tell me what you think of that. And they'd be like, oh my God, that's the best Pinot Grigio I've ever had. And then I would show them and say, yeah, because it's not Pinot Grigio. We were pouring Walters Tokai, by the glass there. People just went nuts for it. So I think getting those wines in front of people is really, really key. And I guess that's all about having the right partner in the States, right? That's about having, the type of wholesaler, distributor in your markets, whether that be the States or that be in the UK, who's out there sort of literally popping corks and not just flipping their portfolio pages in front of people.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really impressed with how quickly the consortio of Chianti Classico has really been messaging here in the United States. There was a time not that long ago, 5-6 years ago, where people thought Chianti was boring. Young wine writers or even mature wine writers just didn't understand how good Sangiovese and Chianti Classico had become in the last 30 years. And now people are all about it. They've really gotten out there and pulled the cork. And I think they had a bigger uphill struggle personally than we do in Friuli. We just got to get organized and go after it.
Gotcha. So moving on from the international varieties into sort of the more local varieties, things like Ribolla Gialla, which is exploding here, sometimes for the right reasons, sometimes for the wrong reasons. How would you go about, bringing that to people, and how would you explain that to people? What's the audience for something like a good Ribolla Gialla?
Well, I think, if you do a crisp, lighter style, it's such a perfect aperitivo.
Right.
It's really good sparkling too. And then, of course, it gets the megaphone I hear some very serious sommeliers that think the Ribolla is only done macerated.
Really?
And I'm like, no, slow down, hold on, hold the phone. No, it didn't start macerated. That started in the 90s. Here's all the other ways you can enjoy it.
Do you think that Ribolla Gialla became famous for being macerated because maceration actually gives a level of, let's say, character and complexity to Ribolla Gialla that it normally doesn't have? I've heard that complaint before.
I have too. Maybe I get to drink too many good Ribollas.
That's the luxury of having that type of knowledge and choice.
Because I don't see that. I mean, like, I look at someone like an uber, like, crazy producer like Enzo. Like, dude, Ribolla in his hands has a whole different program. I think that's like the perfect marriage of a grape giving to a producer something that the producer doesn't have, and the producer giving the grape something that the grape doesn't have.
Gotcha. So it's technique is really important there too.
And obviously his farming and getting the yield, Ribolla, getting the yields lower and all that. I mean, The thing about Ribolla, it's really popular, but really aren't we on the same page that Ribolla really needs to be lower yielding in a steeper vineyard? So not all vineyards are created for that.
Yeah, and the explosion that's happening here with Ribolla Gialla is that everybody's jumping on the Ribolla Gialla Spumante bandwagon, right? Thinking that it's going to be, the Friulian Prosecco, and they're planting it in the Grave, and they're planting it in the lowlands, and they're planting it in Aquileia, thinking they're going to do big yields because it's a vigorous grape variety, and they're going to make like oceans of this, really cool sparkling wine. Whereas when you start planting it there, it loses all of its character. And a lot of people who sort of gambled on that have been either selling wines at ridiculous prices. You get your Lidl bottles of Ribolla Gialla Spumante for $1.99. And then you have amazing bottles of Ribolla Gialla Spumante that, if you close your eyes, you'd be looking at the best sparkling wines on the planet. So there's a big disparity there.
Yeah. Look, that's a varietal that is not forgiving.
No.
It will push yields. And that goes back to education. We got to know what we're dealing with. We need to educate the consumer, and Ribolla shouldn't be planted everywhere.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I remember talking to Marian Simcic, and he was like, tops of the hills only, the poorest, rockiest soil, crests of the hills. That's the only place where it's really going to shine.
Yeah.
I remember him telling me that. What about things like Schioppettino, Pignolo? I mean, one of the things that I've been thinking about as far as Friuli is concerned are there's little pockets coming out. You talked about Oslavia. We talked about Prepolto. Now there's this Savorniano Bianco that's coming out, that's Friulano and Piccolit. And I'm getting this idea that...
Sara stuff.
What's that?
Marco Sara's
exactly.
Friulano.
Yeah.
Wow, that stuff is delicious.
It is, and their wines are great. And there's like 4 or 5 producers up there that have jumped on this bandwagon. I believe the subzone has been approved in Rome, and I think it's just a matter of signatures that it's going to become an actual subzone. And I'm thinking, well, maybe this is kind of the future of Friuli, where you have these little enclaves. Friuli, Ribolla Gialla in Oslavia is king, right? And then you have Schioppettino in Prepolto is king. Now you're going to have this really cool white blend in Savorniano. And then, Christian Keber is doing his, Collio Bianco Uva Autoctone. That's, very specific. And so maybe like this is the thing that's going to start, because people love Oslavia. People are flocking to Oslavia. Let's get people to flock to Prepolto, and let's get people to flock to, Savorniano del Torre. Do you think that's a legitimate strategy?
I think it's I think it's really important. I think it's easy. Other people look at that as a big hill to climb, but it just goes back to, we just need to be about education. We got to lean into the diversity, lean into these subzones, because to me, it makes natural sense. Like, I obviously spent a lot of time there, but like, you're right on. Like, look, Schioppettino should be championed for the small subzone that it is the champion of. And we should really understand that. We should understand, these subzones. I love that.
So do you think that in general, Friulian wine is in sort of a growth phase, or is it in sort of a recession phase right now in the States in general?
I think it is poised. It could be in a maximum growth phase, because in my tiny echo chamber, it's grown a lot. Like, you go around wine shops and things in Colorado, we have so much cool Friulano stuff, because we have 20 years of not just my restaurant, but think of all the employees that have gone on to take over other wine lists or even start their own restaurants and gone to Friuli with me. So Colorado's got a lot of Friulano-ness going on. But I also think we're way more poised for this if we just focus on the messaging.
Okay. So for you, it's all about the messaging. It's all about the education.
About the education.
Who should we be educating?
First, the wine writers. They don't get it. I mean, listen, if I see another anti-international varietal Friuli speak, and confusion of that. To me, when I hear that, that's just someone who doesn't know what's going on.
Okay.
There's a couple books that have come out this year that really speak to that, and they're missing the point. We gotta learn about the historical varietals that came from somewhere else.
Mm.
And as you said earlier in the talk, look, Friulano's actually been there the shortest amount of time.
Yeah.
So we really need to understand that. So the wine writers, we got to stop writing books that include Friuli with Alto Adige and Trentino. We need to let people know of this diversity. You know, you think about Italy, you live there. The country is surrounded mostly by water.
Mm-hmm.
There's many that are close to the sea and close to a mountain. My wife's family is from Abruzzo. They have the same deal. But on the other side of their mountains is Rome and Lazio, which is warm. The other side of the Carnic Alps is Central Europe. Friuli has a very interesting sea wine country mountain scape that gives it its own power and texture.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those few places where, you know, the Alps meet the sea and you have plains, you have, you know, foothills, you have high mountains, you have wonderful seaside, you have a little bit of everything there. And it's this very particular soil, especially up in places like Carso or places like Colli Orientali.
Yeah, like you have Ponca. Like
exactly.
No one else has got that.
Yeah, so one of the things that I was speaking about with somebody when we were talking about the whole sort of native variety kind of revolution that's going on here, and the idea of Friuli searching for an identity, is this whole idea. It's like, well, if you make amazing Chardonnay or Sauvignon, keep doing that. But maybe if you're just sort of like producing a little bit of Friulano or a little bit of Refosco to kind of fill out your portfolio, that maybe you should try and focus on whatever it is you think you do best. Because, you know, the problem with a lot of Friulian wineries is they make a lot of different wines. What do you think about that kind of idea? Should they sort of pare down and sort of focus on their own niche, or is this, you know, 2024 bottling philosophy still valid?
I mean, look, in Germany, you have 24 bottlings of Riesling, just different Ostlist levels. I think I like where you're going with that is like, hey, if you do great Sauvignon Blanc, do great Chardonnay, you've got a great vineyard, don't ever stop doing that. But if you also have another varietal that's really good, lean into that too. I really like that. I just really wish we could really champion some of these great climats of the historical varietals, the Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, and then really champion and let people know about a climat of Schippettino.
Gotcha.
Look, Schippettino is such a cool varietal because it really is in a poise for a great moment now that so many people have gotten used to drinking cool climate reds from like the Loire or wherever. It really plays into that well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I've been sworn to secrecy, but there's going to be a really big deal that's going to happen sort of in mid-October about Schippettino.
Oh my God, I can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be a pretty big deal. So yeah, just because of you know, working with Ronchi di Cialla, I have sort of a little bit of inside info, but I don't think I can quite divulge it yet.
Will you tell them I said hi?
I will for sure. So I'm working on this project just to sort of get away from the whole general Friuli thing and talk about maybe another grape variety. We've talked mostly about whites, maybe a little bit about you know, Schippettino, but I'm doing a whole month of events here called Ottobre Rosso Refosco. Talking about, because I think that you can talk about great Schippettino, but Schippettino's gonna be probably the best from Propalto. You can talk about great Pignolo, but Pignolo's probably gonna be from a place like Butrio, you know, someplace warmer. But when you talk about Refosco, You can make great Refosco in Latizana near Lignano. You can make great Refosco in the hills of Carso. You can make great Refosco way up in Faedes where it's cooler and wetter. So I feel like Refosco is the ambassador grape variety, native grape variety for Friuli. How do you feel about Refosco in general? Whether it's Terrano, Refosco di Peduncolo Rosso, or Refosco di Faedes, what's sort of your feeling about it?
I love, and I love how you just described that, Wayne. Bravo. And it started making me reflect about 2014. I remember the time I was in Friuli. It was July 2014 and we've lost this incredibly beautiful human being, Sam Bell from Blackberry Farm. I was in Craig Lewis, Danette, and I, a former pro cyclist, Robbie Ventura, were helping guide a Blackberry Farm trip in Friuli. It was really cool. No one had been to Friuli except for Craig, Danette, and I. And it was Sam Bell, the founder of Blackberry Farm's first trip. The guy's maniac about wine. He is one of the greatest wine sellers he put together before we lost him in the world. And I remember him just clicking onto Refosco that trip. And every time at dinner, and look, one of the great things about Sam was he had a great palate, but he was a professional consumer. He would always ask to open another bottle, to try another bottle. And it was seeing the light go off with Refosco for him was exactly like what you just described. He's like, I want to try it here. I want to try it there, and I can't think about, I don't know, after he got clicked onto, if we went through a meal without him scourging the list, trying to find one from a different producer and wondering why it's different in the Carso, why it's different there. I mean, you nailed it. It's the varietal that can do all those regions.
Cool. Yeah. And that's, I really am hoping to, and this is the third year I've been doing it. The first two have been sort of experiments. This year I'm sort of pushing it, but I'm really looking forward to making Refosco the mascot. A lot of people know Friuli for white wine, but they know it less for red wine. And there's some amazing red wines here, and I think Refosco is the one that you can find more ubiquitously.
Yeah. It's funny. I hear people when they introduce me, I swear to God, I'll get introduced if I'm giving a wine talk somewhere and they're like, and Bobby Stuckey, he has Frasca Food and Wine. That's a champion of Friuli Venezia Giulia. This is a region of world-class whites and nice reds. That's literally how they introduce me. And I'm looking at them like,
hey,
really? No, we great reds here.
World-class whites and nice reds. Yeah, just the reds are always sort of like backseat.
That literally happened last week at a talk I was giving out of state. And I was like, oh, okay, thanks, nice reds. But, there are some really delicious ones, and I love where you're going with that with Refosco.
Yeah, I think it's only going to get better, and I think the identity for Refosco is going to refine and all that sort of stuff. And I can't wait to sort of taste all of the different ones that we've lined up for next month, for October, to see where this goes.
That is really cool.
Yeah. Well, when are you going to be back in Friuli? You got any trips planned coming back over here?
I heard Alicia talking to Lachlan. Alicia is my executive coordinator. She kind of plans my world. And then, Lachlan knows how to utilize Alicia to the max. And I think he says we're going in December.
Okay. Well, so I look forward to seeing you then.
Yeah. And I always love that I'm the last to know when I'm going to Friuli.
And I always know when you're here because you're always good on social media. And I always say, hey man, hit me up if you got some free time. But I know you're like always solidly booked when you're over here.
Hey, you know what we'll do? We're just going to make sure, because Lachlan writes my schedule over there. We're going to go, let's get some free time where we can get Wayne and all of us to have a Tayut together.
I would love to. Well, I really, really appreciate the time that you've spent with me today. I mean, is there anything else that you could leave us with? I mean, the state of the union of Friulian wine, is it good? Do you feel that it's good? Are you optimistic?
I'm very optimistic. I'm very positive on it if we do the right thing. And I instead of looking at our diversity as a challenge, you look at our diversity as the same thing that hooked me almost 30 years ago. So lean into the diversity and also lean into the right storytelling. Get the writers to understand what we do. Get the writers to understand we have great indigenous varietals, but we have great historical varietals, and let's call them historical because there is history there.
That's great. I love it. What was the last great Friuli wine that you tasted or that you drank? What's something that sticks with you that you've had recently?
I don't want to be that guy because it sounds too fancy, but
Okay.
I did just drink some 2016 Borgo d'Attilio. It was Borgo d'Attilio, Ronco di Chiesa.
Ronco della Chiesa. Wow. Unbelievable wine.
So good.
Yeah. Unbelievable wine.
I mean, look, you know, I don't want to be that, but that's the last great. I mean, it was a couple days ago. It was Sunday, so today's Wednesday. But you know, it was just one of those moments that we needed to have one more bottle of wine at the end of a great afternoon with my family, and that's what I grabbed from downstairs, and it was awesome.
Right, that's fantastic. Yeah, he's an amazing guy, Monferrati.
Total character.
Total character. Yeah. Yeah, my last real, amazing experience with Friuli wine was I happened to walk in at a tasting at one of the restaurants where I do events, and they were tasting the latest vintage. I believe it was 2018 or 17 of Castelladas, Bianco della Castellada, and it was just mind-blowingly good.
How good are those wines right now? Huh?
Fantastic. Stefano is a great guy as well. He was on the podcast a couple of years ago, and he's such a sweet dude.
He's such a sweet dude. He's a sweet dude. His dad's great. That whole family's awesome.
Oh, I got some stories to tell you about Nicola.
Oh, I'd love to hear them. You know, that what I love is seeing families like that, having Stefano walk in and Matea coming in to go work with his dad at Borgo d'Attilio. Like, seeing the next generation is going to be really exciting.
Yeah. And I'm hoping
maybe that's the one thing we close with is there's a lot of good next generation stuff going on.
I totally agree. You know, when I came here in 98, there was all this talk about like, oh, the sons are going to sort of take over and take it up to the next level. And I think there was something about that didn't quite pan out. I think that there were maybe some people who did really, really well when Friulian wines exploded, and then they kind of just said, well, let's not rock the boat. And then that strategy didn't work out as well as they had hoped. But now the grandchildren, I think, are stepping in, and they're really going to make a difference. I'm super positive about that.
That has to be on the podcast because this next generation is going to be lights out. And that's another reason for positivity and to be bullish.
Cool. Bobby, thank you so much for spending time here. Say hello to Lachlan and especially Danette for me.
Yeah. Let me know when the podcast is up. I can't wait.
I will definitely send you the link.
Okay, brother. I love you. I'll see you in December.
Thank you very much. I'll see you in December. Thanks a million.
Okay. Bye.
Ciao.
Thanks to you and to our guests for joining us on La Taverna. Be sure to follow me on Instagram at La Taverna Podcast and Facebook at La Taverna Friuli. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen. And if you enjoy the podcast, leave us a nice 5-star review on your favorite platform.